This is the Cessna 182 from HobbyKing, and it is available with a set of floats. I have found, however, that using the standard included mounting hardware, the floats are not positioned correctly, and the takeoff run will lead to a few surprises. Have a look at the following video. Kom eens kyk maar wat gebeur. As you could see from the video, there is a tendency for the airplane to perform a fairly violent turn as it picks up speed during the takeoff run. There are a few basic reasons for this. The standard included float mounts position the floats too far forward with regards to the center of gravity, and the incidence angle of the wing, in other words, the angle that the top of the float has in relation to the angle of the wing, is not correct. The following video details the changes necessary to line things up correctly. Those sudden high-speed turns, as you can see in the takeoff videos, can be extremely dangerous. On one of those very sudden turns, the aircraft left the water, cartwheeled, and then re-entered the water at an acute angle, in the process breaking both floats, as you can see where I had to re-epoxy them, shearing off the tip of the left wing, breaking the propeller and bending the motor shaft. To correctly mount the floats, the step position has to be moved backwards. Compared to the original position where the equivalent step was a little bit in front of the ideal center of gravity, the new float mount positions the equivalent step approximately a quarter inch behind the ideal center of gravity. The aim of the new floats was to use as many of the existing parts as possible and to fabricate the least amount of new parts. The main strut mount, which is angled, there are two of them, the one is straight and the one is an angled one, is now mounted in the rear position with the angle or the rake pointed towards the back of the aircraft. This moves the equivalent position of the float backwards so far that the equivalent step is now lined up approximately 1/4 behind the ideal center of gravity of the aircraft. As this is done, you can now see that the existing float mount for the front is not going to line up with the mount position on top of the float. I had to make a new aluminum mount. To make a template, I've used some soft metal. This was part of a downspout. It's easy to cut, easy to bend, to make a template from which the aluminum mount can then be made. So what exactly is meant by the angle of incidence of the wing relative to that of the float? What you want is a situation where the leading edge of the wing is higher up compared to the top of the floats than the trailing edge. This gives you more lift during the takeoff run. The ideal position is where the leading edge of the wing is 2 degrees positive to the top of the float. Many authors say 0 to 2 degrees, but 2 degrees actually gives you a huge amount of extra lift, which is what I'm going to aim for here. To find out if you have things lined up correctly, you have to place a spirit level on top of the float and make sure that the top of the float is level. Once you've got that set up, you can use a wing incidence meter such as this one from Great Plains, and as you can see, it's set to approximately 2 degrees of positive angle. When mounting the floats, remember that you want to position the equivalent position of the step lined up with approximately 1/4 of an inch behind the ideal center of gravity. In order to do so, you have to remember that the equivalent step is not the back of this V, but a position somewhere along the middle, or even slightly to the front of this V structure over here. This is the part that you wish to align with the center of gravity on the wing. Here you can see the floats now mounted to the aircraft using the modified mounting hardware. A stabilizer bar is used from the top of the front strut to the bottom of the rear strut to avoid any rearward movement of the floats during the landing process. Here you can see the detail of the custom-made front strut as seen from the bottom, and the rear strut is just the included strut pointed backwards. I had to modify my little hatch at the bottom with a little piece of elastic at the back and a little plastic lip at the front because I kept losing my hatch. Some of the higher G turns seems to overcome the magnets. Very easy, just put a little hook on each side and run a piece of elastic across, and then it's not going to come off. And that's on the back. Now on the front I took a piece of clear plastic and glued it on just with hot glue, so now the battery hatch slides underneath this clear plastic, and in the back the little piece of elastic keeps it in place. Since I've done this modification, I have not lost the hatch at all. There's another modification that you can make if you like. The standard cowl has a breather hole here, and I was a bit worried for water taxiing and landing that I may get some water going in there. So I took a plastic spoon and cut it off to make like a little air scoop, and now any water coming from the front cannot enter into the cowl, while at the same time the ventilation is actually quite good. In fact, there's a Venturi effect, so the ventilation may even be better. I find that when I put the aircraft down right side up, it tends to sit with all of its weight concentrated right at the step of the float. In order to prevent the float from being damaged there, I glued a small piece of wood into the foam like that, and now when it sits on that, the wood takes the weight and there is no chance of damaging the float at all.